So we're going to do an introduction to the Lee Pro 1000 Progressive Press. I've probably got about 5,000 rounds loaded on this now. I previously loaded all my ammo on the Lee Classic Turret, which is a very good press for the money and is very versatile, useful, very simple to set up. But it is not good for high volume progressive loading. It takes 4 pulls of the handle on the Classic Turret to produce 1 round, whereas true progressive presses produce 1 round for every pull of the handle. The Lee Pro 1000 press is a true progressive. However, it has several caveats that if you want to go to a true progressive, you need to consider. So I thought I'd give you my impressions after the first few thousand rounds loading on this, and some of the fixes and mods that have been suggested on the forums and also on YouTube, and whether or not they've been successful for me. So in the first case, the biggest pro of the Lee Pro 1000 is the price. I got this for $140 shipped from jet.com, and it comes with dies, it comes with a case feeder, it comes with a powder measure. It's ready to go right out of the box for 140 bucks. You can't beat that. You can probably get 4 or 5 Lee Pro 1000s for the cost of a Hornady top of the line setup or the Dillon 650, 550, 650 setup, if you include the case feeder and everything that this comes with for those other presses. So press to press, there's no other press even close to the price. Another advantage is it is very simple to use, very simple to diagnose problems, and it's pretty straightforward. The other advantage is that it is faster than a semi-progressive like the Classic Turret or single stage. It's much faster. So those are the major advantages. The disadvantages are myriad. However, the first disadvantage is that the powder flies everywhere when you index it into this third station. I've tried several different suggested modifications, but nothing solves that problem for me. So what you have to do is, at least I have to do, is I put a bullet on the case as it's moving into this third position. So I look really quickly, make sure I've got a light here. This is another one of the things you need, is to be able to see into every case. This is a sewing machine light. It's magnetic, so it just sticks onto the frame. Got it from Amazon for about 14 bucks, an LED sewing machine light with a flexible neck, so you can put it where you want. So I look in the case, make sure it has powder, proper powder level as it's moving into position 3. Place the bullet on top of it as it's moving into position 3, because otherwise it snaps into position 3 and powder flies out everywhere. So that's why I have a can of canned air dusting stuff. If it does that, which happens frequently, I just spray it off so that powder doesn't get down inside the mechanism. So that's one con, and you can index it. You can adjust the rotation until it just barely snaps in position, but I have adjusted it as far as I can possibly go while it's still having it be indexed properly, and it's still, when it rolls over that detent ball into the third position, it still flies powder everywhere. So that's something you just need to be aware of. The second major con, and probably my only real complaint with this press, is the priming system is very fiddly and very unreliable. It is quick to fill, which is good. It's very quick to fill primers. You just pull this reservoir off. That's the old style reservoir. This is the new style reservoir. They come with these now, and you may or may not have success with these. The one that mine came with was this type, but it was the first model of these, and it was molded improperly, and primers would flip inside. So you'd get upside down primers, which obviously is not desirable. So a wealthy philanthropist on one of the forums sent me this one for free. This is the old style. So maybe if you could get one of those, it would be better. I much prefer this. It's easier to fill and use. So that part of it is great. You can fill primers up quickly. Second part is not so great, which is this. The chute runs by gravity. So try to get focus here. It's basically gravity-fed chute. They come down in there, and this is your primer switch. When the case runs by this, it flips this out and allows the primers to slide down. So the only thing that's keeping those primers going is the gravity and the weight of this reservoir of primers pushing down on that line of primers. So if it gets below here, you want to stop reloading because you'll stop to get reliable primer feeds. And even the way it is, you won't get reliable primer feeds. I get about probably 0.1% to 1% failure rate. And I've had up to maybe 10% failure rate, depending on how dirty I let the primer chute get, or different types of primers sometimes slide a little bit differently. They recommend CCI primers, I believe, or I think that's what they recommend. Anyway, read the manual. But one thing, I'll talk about the fixes in the mods and tips section. So that's what happens is that the primer don't slide in properly, and you get mashed or flipped primers, and you get either they don't seat or they seat sideways into the cases and get destroyed. So that's really the only con that has been really bothering me. And the other thing is primer disposal. The LCT, the primers drop down the RAM into a tube reservoir, and it's a very easy and very simple system, and an elegant system to deal with that problem. On this one, they drop down the side of the RAM right there. You can probably see it one go as we see here. Make sure I can get it. There's a little reservoir that it goes down the center of the RAM, but it drops out the side of it. Right there. So here we go. It's going to go. You see that? So where that goes is it just drops down into the base. So you can see some primers down in there. And both sides are open, but it really only falls down that one side. And so what happens is this fills up with primers, and then you get to here and you have to uninstall your press from your table and basically just dump it out or shake it out. The bottom is open. There's little molding recesses. I have mine mounted on this Lee bench plate, which allows you to quickly remove and exchange presses, which is nifty, but it causes some other problems with how to get something that will catch the completed round. But anyway, that's the third major thing, is primer disposal. It's annoying, it's doable, but it's annoying and messy. The fourth major negative for this press is, as you can see, it's only 3 stations. Most progressives are at least 4 stations, and almost all the good ones have 5 or even 6 stations. So you can run a powder cop die, you can run bullet feeders, you can run all sorts of different stuff. This one, if you want to run bullet feeder, if you want to run a powder cop die, you basically have to do 2 batches. So you'll do one batch with one head when you size and deprime, maybe charge, or maybe just flare at that point. And then you'll do another batch where you're powder cop, seating, and crimping, or you can do powder cop, seat, and crimp. Wait a minute, never mind. You know what I mean. You can use the 3 stations for. You can basically use this as a 6-station press, but you have to do it in two separate steps. And in that case, you're having to feed bullets on the right side of the press here, which is maybe not a bad thing, but I recommend just running it as a 3-station. It's not difficult to set up your dies to seat and crimp in one station. That's actually how I've been running my 9mm dies on the LCT, even though it has 4 stations. I didn't have a separate seating and crimping die set up for 9mm, so I've been running a 3-die setup on the LCT. You can see my other videos for that, and I had zero issues. So as long as you it's follow directions, you can basically set up any standard 3-die set to seat and crimp properly. If you have problems with some loads, then you might want to try to set it up to do seat and crimp separately, and in which case you'll have to do it in 2 separate operations. Okay, so that's the pros and cons. So let's talk a little bit about the fixes or the mods or the tips that I've tried, that I've read about. The first thing that you absolutely must do, according to everybody who owns one of these, and is the #1 thing that everyone says to do, is polish the primer chute. So this primer chute is a 2-piece plastics that sandwiches this way. It's split down the center. You basically need to clean out and polish that piece, which requires you to, this is a separate shell plate. This is the large primer shell plate for 45 caliber. You can take apart and reinstall the large primer shell plate in the original, but it's easier and quicker if you just buy the large primer shell plate. This is about $30. It comes like this. So this is the original. I can't remember if I got this in 45 or in 9 first. I think I got it in 9 anyway. So you take this primer, take the plate off. You'll watch instructions on how to do that. It's very simple. Then this primer chute pops off. Take it apart sideways, polish it up inside, put it back together. The other thing that I highly recommend is that you make a cover for, so this is actually a plastic cover that's taped on to keep powder and other debris from dropping onto the primers and into the primer chute. That will help them slide down there and keep them from getting flipped much more effectively than if you leave it open. So I've made 2 of those. They're made, I just make them out of soda bottles, and you just have to kind of bend them around something suitable and then just tape them on. I just have mine taped on with Scotch tape. That helps a lot. So that's the first thing that I would recommend that you do. The second thing is polish the completed case chute. This is pretty rough casting from the factory, and just polish it with, I'm gonna make sure this one doesn't fall into my cases, because I'm not double sure about that, because I've sort of been talking while I'm doing this. So I'm gonna dump the powder from all these and pull them. But anyway, polish this with a steel wool, fine steel wool. I've done that on both of the cases. What do they call these shell plate holders, carriers or something? And it makes a difference. It drops them much more reliably. Otherwise they get stacked up in here just from friction, and you have to kind of just brush them off with your finger every 4 or 5 rounds, which is not a big deal. But anyway, that's an easy fix. Just polish that with steel wool. The other thing is, if you want 9mm or 380 or 223 cases to feed properly, you need to make this dime mod. So the way it is, they'll flip because these holes are too large, and they allow, without this thing here, those holes are too large, then they'll allow several cases per batch. Every time you feed this, you basically just pour them in here and shake this, and they auto index. It's a really cool system, very elegant, like a lot of Lee's solutions to problems. But 9mm and 380 in smaller cases will flip if you don't make this mod. So it's called the dime mod. I did it with a penny first, and I didn't get the penny, the hole centered first properly. As you can see, it's not exactly centered, so one of the tubes wouldn't fill very reliably. So I tried it with the dime, and it works better with the dime for 9mm anyway. So you just drill a hole. I can't remember what it is, but it's 22 caliber, enough to fit a 22 case, and then you kind of mash the end of it so that it has friction against the center little hole there. And it holds itself in place, and that basically makes these holes smaller and reliably enables them to flip so that the cases feed case down every time. So that would be the other thing I recommend. Case feeder is really cool, and it does save lots and lots of time. So if you're going to buy this to be a progressive press, then I definitely would recommend using this, since it comes with it for free anyway. The other thing that some people have recommended, particularly not an expert on YouTube, he has a lot of really good tips for this. Go watch his videos. One of the things that he recommends is installing a plastic or steel bushing in the top of the die plate where the indexing rod goes in. He says that solved his priming issues. I haven't done that yet, but I recommend you go watch it and see if it's for you. I haven't had the desire or the means to do that yet. But anyway, so the overall is very good press for the money, which is not very much money. So if you're budget minded, if you really want to get into progressive press but you don't have a lot of money, there's not a better one in my opinion. However, priming system does need tweaking and some modifications in order to run properly. And if you're not a kind of handyman, kind of a person that knows how machines work and can figure out what's going on, this is not the press for you, because you're going to have to tweak little things and figure things out a little bit as you go. This is just a bread tray that has enough of a lip on it that I can get over the mount, enough for it to drop feeding completed cases in reliably. That was my solution. So I just use this for my bullets and this for my completed cases. I also am not running the chain return for the Lee Pro Auto Disc powder measure. I'm just using the standard spring return, which is how it works on the turret. And that has been exceptionally reliable for me for 40,000 rounds. So since I switch calibers pretty frequently, I didn't want to mess with the chain. And I know exactly what this powder measure throws, and I always check them, obviously. But anyway, that's why I choose to do this. I'm just using the spring return. So if you choose to do it, that's up to you. So anyway, hope you enjoyed and learned something. Hopefully this was helpful for somebody. See you next time.